You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I am Kirk Mona, and I am joined today by Rachel Ginza and Victoria Thompson. We are all professional naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
Well, hello, everybody. Good to see you.
Hey.
I'm
Good
here.
to be here.
Good to be here.
Oh, so good.
And I'm starting us off this week.
Ooh.
I'm going to tell a little story. You've probably heard some version of this.
Ooh.
Oh, okay.
So
I love a good
July 2nd, 1937,
Okay.
Amelia Earhart
Mm.
and
Oh,
her
yes.
navigator, Fred Noonan, took off from Lae, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, airfield in what is now Papua New Guinea.
Mm-hmm.
They
Sure
were they were on the final leg of their round-the-world flight, but it would be the most hazardous part. They had to cross the huge expanse of the Pacific Ocean. They
Right.
had only 2 refueling stops planned. The first
Oof.
was planned for tiny Howland Island, where the U.S. Navy had constructed an airstrip and stationed a ship, especially for them.
That's pretty cool.
From there, she pulled some strings. From there, they would fly to Honolulu and then on back to Oakland, which was the starting point of the trip.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, as we know, Earhart and Noonan never made it to Howland Island,
Right.
and the world has been searching ever since for definitive answers to what happened to them and the plane.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
There are a bunch of wild conspiracy theories out there, although, of course,
so
yeah,
many.
there are.
yeah. Of course, the most likely explanation is that the plane simply ran out of fuel and crashed into the Pacific Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because
However-
that's what they basically radioed and said was happening. But yeah.
Yes.
Right.
However, there is one other theory about what happened that is a bit more credible than the other wacky theories. It's not more
Mhm.
credible than it. To be clear, the most likely is still that they just crashed into the
Just
Pacific.
in the ocean. yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but this one is plausible at least. So in this telling, realizing that they would not be able to find Howland Island due to the navigation and radio issues that they were having,
Mm-hmm.
which you can go look it up. I'm not going to get into the details.
I think
they
I know
turned
where you're going.
Yeah, they turned toward the south and wound up landing on Gardner Island, which is now known as Nikumaroro.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I've heard that version a lot.
Yes. So in this case, the plane in this scenario, the plane would have subsequently been washed off the reef in a storm and sunk. So that's why it wasn't found. And the
Right.
bodies of the aviators, well, the theory is that the bodies were consumed by coconut crabs,
Ah. Uh-huh.
Lovely.
which
Lovely.
brings us to this week's topic, the incredible coconut crab.
Oh.
Oh,
I had not
lovely.
heard of these creatures until very recently. They are mind-blowing.
Yes, they are.
Absolutely
I'm gonna take
mind-blowing.
this off my list.
Sorry, Rachel.
No worries.
So the Latin name is Birgus latro. They are the world's largest terrestrial arthropod.
Yup.
Yes. They are land crabs.
Oh.
They can weigh
Cool.
They can weigh up to 4.1 kilograms, 9
Oh.
pounds.
That's a big
Okay.
crab.
It's a big crab. They have a leg span of almost a meter.
Oh my.
It's fine.
We broke Rachel.
They're enormous.
Uh-huh.
They live, luckily for us, on remote islands in the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Actually, they used to live in other parts of the world, like parts of Australia, but they all got eaten up.
Oh,
Yeah.
They tasted too good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably large and tasty, yes.
So some populations have beautiful coloration with white stripes and spots on various parts of their body with dark red and orange carapace that shades into purple and blue legs. Others are a little duller colored, but Yeah, some of them are extremely colorful.
Mhm.
Their legs are tall and curve inward, and they walk up on the tips of their claws, sort of more vertically
Aw.
than your typical crab that you think of.
I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
they became a meme on Tumblr at one point.
Probably. I would not be surprised at all. This stance that they have makes a little more sense when you learn that coconut crabs are in fact a species of hermit crab.
Oh, okay.
So if you think about a hermit crab and their little legs
Yeah,
coming
yeah.
out, they're kind of
Mhm.
upright a little bit. Okay, so you think of hermit crabs and you also think of those cute little things that occupy empty snail shells to protect the
Right.
softer part of their bodies that sometimes people keep as
Yeah.
pets. Well, that is what juvenile coconut crabs do. But once they become
Okay.
adults, they are hard-shelled all over. They're gigantic, and they do not need protection, except
No.
from humans,
Gotcha.
obviously.
Mhm.
So, as you might guess from the name, coconut crabs eat coconuts.
Oh,
Uh,
what a
coconuts
wild,
are,
wild coincidence.
yeah,
Or
well,
or people.
Right.
possibly. Uh, Coconuts are famously rather hard to first get off
Open?
the tree and to open.
Yeah.
Wait.
So,
Do they climb the tree? If these crabs climb trees, I'm out.
Rachel, they climb
No.
the trees.
Oh my gosh. They're
Oh
crabs.
my
They're
gosh.
crabs. They shouldn't be
Oh
able
my
to climb a
gosh.
tree. They're a crab.
A
No.
a meter long crab climbing up into a tree.
No. It shouldn't be able to
Oh,
do
yes.
that.
Oh, yes.
And you thought drop bears were bad.
I thought
Also-
flying snakes were bad.
Also, they
Oh.
can tear the coconuts open using their massive serrated pinchers.
Wow.
These crabs
Horrifying.
are
I love it.
incredibly strong. For reference, on the force that they can bring to bear with their claws, the maximum human bite force with the jaw is around 1,300 newtons.
Okay.
Coconut crabs have been actually measured with a claw grip force of 1,765 newtons. And given that the larger the crab is, the bigger the force, they estimate that the largest crabs could exert a force of 3,300 newtons.
That's a
Rachel's
lot.
just going to keep giggling through the entire episode.
Pretty much, yeah. They said me.
Oh no!
You broke her, and
oh no!
They can also lift up to 30 kilograms or 66 pounds, which is about the weight of a 10-year-old child.
No,
jeez.
no.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
I don't want to meet this crab.
something out of
As-
a horror movie.
As I
think it is a
alluded to
horror
with-
movie.
Yes. As I alluded to with the story about Amelia Earhart, coconut crabs don't only eat coconuts.
Uh-huh.
They are omnivores. They will scavenge whatever they can find. A lot of that is fruits, nuts, dead animals.
Right.
However, they can
Sure.
and will hunt live prey on occasion.
Oh gosh.
Oh,
They're known to
I
attack
would
and
just
eat
flop over.
rats.
and you'd be dead.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. There is even a video that you can see on the internet of one attacking a blue-footed booby.
Oh,
Oh no.
goodness.
Yeah.
They're so
They
cute
have an incredibly sensitive sense of smell that lets them track down food, and in places where they
Really?
interact with humans, that can make them a bit pesky.
though. Mm-hmm. That's fair.
So one of my sources for this episode was an article from Australian Geographic,
Uh-huh.
and there were several funny stories in there, including of them staking out a house where bread was baking.
Oh, no.
Also cutting
They're
their
all, like,
way.
surrounding it.
Yes.
Just picturing them like
The
crawling
crabs are
into
back.
trash cans and coming out. Oh god.
Probably. Cutting their way through chicken wire to get at chicken feed. And
Oh my god.
stealing a rifle from an Australian army troop that
No.
was training on Christmas Island.
It does not need that. That is the last thing that crab needs is a gun.
Oh man.
There is also a mind-boggling Instagram post, which I hope we can share, of
Uh-huh.
a crab caught in the act of climbing up the side of a vehicle to get at the coconuts that were inside that somebody had gathered.
Oh. horrifying.
Wow.
The picture gives a really good sense of the scale of the crab.
Uh-huh.
I bet.
So yeah,
Jeez.
it's really good.
Jesus.
So, all in all, it's not too surprising that another name for them is robber crabs.
That's fair.
And
Okay,
going
makes sense.
back to Amelia Earhart, given their scavenging nature, their strength, and their propensity for carrying things away, such as bones, it is actually pretty plausible that if Earhart and Noonan in fact died on this island, their bodies might not have been found.
Uh-huh. I'm looking
Even
at the
though-
size of this crab. Absolutely not.
Yeah. So even though a Navy plane circled the island searching for them a week after they disappeared.
It would be gone.
In fact,
I mean, look, if there was waves big enough to wash the plane away,
Uh-huh.
the waves could also have washed them away.
yeah. Although they presumably would have gone to like slightly higher ground than the plane.
Sure.
Whatever.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. At this they'd survive. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
In fact, there's a group that's obsessed with this theory, and they have done some experiments. They put out a pig carcass on the island and found that it was eaten, and the bones were scattered far and wide within a quite short amount of time. And actually, a human skull and partial skeleton were found on this island a few years later, but analysis of the bones was inconclusive, and this was like 1940 or something. And then the bones were lost, so we really don't know.
Yeah, I
But-
thought I remember. Yeah, some of the people who looked at the data were like, "Yeah, this doesn't seem right." There's been people who live on this island. Like,
Yeah. There have been shipwrecks there, like other planes have gone there. Like, yeah, there's been a lot of activity that could have resulted in this. So it's not any kind of slam dunk. But back to the crabs.
Yeah.
They also have a pretty interesting life cycle. They spawn in shallow water, and the larvae attach themselves to floating coconuts or other flotsam. They hang out for about 4 to 6 weeks. And then they metamorphose into a stage called a glaucotho, which looks a little bit like a tiny shrimp. And then they drift toward the bottom of the ocean floor, where they search for a little shell to use. And
Aw.
then gradually they crawl and migrate toward the shore. As juvenile crabs, still with their hermit crab shells, they are on land before they leave them behind as adults, as they grow larger. However, as adults, they cannot swim, and they can't breathe underwater, unlike in the larval stages. And
That's
this
good.
is kind of fascinating, but they have an organ called branchiostegal lungs that is kind of halfway in between lungs and gills.
Huh.
So it's developed out of where a marine crab's gills would be, but it's adapted to breathe air.
Cool.
Yeah.
Super cool.
So
Wild.
coconut crabs, nightmare, amazing.
Yeah, I'm going to be thinking about them in my nightmares forever. I was just looking at the picture that you...
Sweet dreams.
Oh, God. I was looking at the picture you mentioned, Victoria, and, like, I understood the scale, but, like, I didn't understand the scale.
Exactly.
These are horrifyingly large.
That's why they say a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Uh-huh. Ooh.
You are very far from the ocean right now, Rachel, so I think you're safe.
Yeah, you're right. Oof.
My sources this week were that article in Australian Geographic that I mentioned, the UK Natural History Museum, and Smithsonian Magazine.
Thanks,
All right,
Victoria.
you're welcome. My pleasure. We're going to take a little break, and when we come back, Kirk will have something for us.
Welcome back, everybody. The mascot of this here podcast is the wonderfully strange platypus.
Oh,
Now,
it's
Rachel
so
did an
good.
episode all about them, but I think there was one little fact that she might have missed about them, and it is certainly strange, and it's where I want to start this week's story.
Oh,
Okay.
So,
exciting.
naturally, there are both male and female platypuses.
Mm-hmm.
Like most mammals, when we are speaking of biological sex, you have females with 2 X chromosomes and males with 1 X and 1 Y chromosome. And this is true for the platypus, but there's something different going on. In human biological males, the X chromosome is the same as the X chromosome in females, but we only get one copy of it. And the Y chromosome, though, in humans is just kind of a mess. Like it is not a complete set of biological instructions like the X chromosome is. Over time, it has been presumably pruned down to its current size. The X chromosome has between 900 and 1500 genes. And that number is kind of, the reason there's such a range there is it kind of depends on where you draw the lines for what's a gene and whatnot. But in comparison, the Y chromosome only has 70 to 200. I've seen some people throwing out the number like 55 as well. So definitely not as many genes on there. Most of the genes on the Y chromosome have long been assumed to be junk that don't really code for anything. But I think over time we're learning that that's just not really true. They seem to play a role in both immune response and in like the prevention of aging. But the really key thing that the Y chromosome does have is the sex chromosomes that code for how to change an embryo into a male human. Well, going back to the platypus and why they're so strange, they have a complete Y chromosome. It isn't like a little rinky-dink little thing like us humans have, us human males. Their Y chromosome is just as big as the X chromosome, has just as many genes in it. Basically, it hasn't been pruned like pretty much every other mammal. Now, even weirder, they actually have a couple of them because the platypus doesn't just have one pair of chromosomes. They have 4 or 5 pairs of chromosomes.
Oh my gosh.
So again, I don't know if we need to really say it, but platypuses are weird.
Bizarre.
Right? Very strange.
Love them.
So that's a pretty wild fact, but it does allow us an interesting opportunity. Since all mammals are descended from a common ancestor, that means if we go back far enough, the platypus and the human share a common ancestor. And that kind of tells us that most likely that common ancestor had a complete Y chromosome. So if we go back far enough in time, probably all mammals had like a complete X and a complete Y chromosome. And for most mammals, then some sort of process started where the Y started to get pruned out. But that didn't happen for the platypus. By looking in the rearview mirror, we can actually calculate how long it took for our Y chromosome to be pruned to its current state. The common ancestor was around 166 million years ago. And so the loss comes down to about 5 genes every million years. By one estimate, like I said earlier, we have about 55 genes in the Y chromosome. So an interesting question comes up. If males keep losing genes off the Y chromosome at the same rate that they have been, how long would it take for the Y chromosome to disappear completely?
Yeah.
And if the rate is constant, it would take 11 million more years before there's nothing left, right? Some people have actually argued that it could take far less time than that. And some argued that it's basically stable now and it won't ever fully disappear. But it brings this really interesting question of like, what if it did?
What would
if the
happen?
human species were to lose the ability to have men, then we're finished as a species. Congratulations. We're done here, right? We're not like some of the species that can do parthenogenesis, and just create.
Not yet.
At the moment.
Not yet, yeah. So, what would happen? Let's get back to the platypus. It may not actually be the best example because it has a very robust Y chromosome, several copies actually. But what's interesting about their Y chromosome is that it lacks what's called the SRY gene. And this is basically the sex determination gene that is found in most mammals. And it's kind of the big deal. It's the main thing on the Y chromosome. So sure, the male platypus still has a Y chromosome, but as far as we can tell, it has nothing to do with it being a male, which is so strange because in our head, like that's kind of we think about, like if it is, if something is XX, it's female, and if it's XY, it's male, because that's what, biologically speaking. But like that's not what makes a male platypus a male. The Y chromosome has nothing to do with actually being a male. It's just that happens to be where the genes are that code
Right.
for making something into a male. So that's just like, it's really wild. And this actually can happen in humans too, through a really weird thing that can happen in the womb, basically, where you can end up with somebody who has, say, 2 X chromosomes, but that SRY gene gets like transferred on to one of the X chromosomes. So someone can be a male person, like biologically, but they have 2 X chromosomes, which is why some of the recent stuff in the Olympics where people were like, we tested this person and they have this. It doesn't matter.
Nope.
That it literally has nothing to do with being a male or a female. And I'm not even
Right.
talking about gender. I'm just talking about like biologically. It all has to do with where the SRY genes are, and they can be on the X chromosome, in which case they code for you being a male, even though you don't have a Y chromosome. So
and that doesn't even get
so
into
complicated.
like the folks who have multiple copies, like 2 X's and a Y.
Oh yeah,
or
Yeah.
That's like a whole other topic. Yeah. So it's really strange, but like clearly mammals can exist with the sex determining chromosome in other places than on the the sex determining gene in other places than on the Y chromosome. Sex can be determined in different ways, which is fascinating. Now that's the kind of thing with the platypus. Those genes are kind of in a different spot, but the best example of how humans could survive the extinction of the Y chromosome could well lie in a rat from Japan.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe a mole from Eastern Europe. Actually, so there's some specific moles in Eastern Europe and a couple of rats in Japan. We actually don't yet know how these moles create males without a Y chromosome. Because I totally skipped the big part here. Both these rats and these moles do not have a Y chromosome. They have completely lost it. We actually still don't know how the moles create males. That hasn't been cracked yet. We don't know.
Cool.
But there was some fairly new research looking at the rats and trying to figure out what's going on there. I will say for the moles, though, like they don't even have an SRY gene anywhere in their genome. So we're like, okay, that's really weird. The rats, we're starting to get some clue on how they do it. So this is a 3 different species of the spiny rat, which is a nearly extinct rat species that's found in Japan. Fascinating animal because it's one of the few mammals that, like I said, don't have any Y chromosome at all. It's been completely eliminated. And scientists are now studying the rat to understand how it still has male and female members of the species when there doesn't seem to be a place for the sex determination chromosomes to live. But a study in 22 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, or PNAS, did find this tiny snippet of DNA that males had that females did not have. And this alternate bit of DNA seems to turn on the sex development functions and create males. So it actually turns on some of the same things that creates males in humans, but they don't have the same gene that sort of is the trigger that we do. They have a different one. So very cool. What it goes to show, which is my sort of the bizarre topic for the week, is that the Y chromosome isn't necessarily needed.
Right.
Which blows my mind because we think of it as such a fundamental thing, like, oh, if you want males, you got to have that Y chromosome. That's what makes something a male. And it really isn't. That's not, it happens to be in most mammals. That's where the genes are that trigger an embryo to develop into a male, but they don't have to be there, which is...
That's bizarre.
Yeah, really bizarre. So ultimately, this is one of those times where we need a time machine to see how this plays out for humans. We're still evolving. We're still changing generation by generation. And who knows, someday far in the future, our notion of X and Y chromosomes determining biological sex may be like a bizarre quirk of the past from millions and millions of years ago. So I don't know. I thought it was a
That'd
really
be
cool thing
cool.
to talk about this week.
Yeah.
My main inspiration for this story was an article in The Conversation by Jenny Graves. So full shout out to her. The story was from December 2022 and was called Men Are Slowly Losing Their Y Chromosome, but a New Sex Gene Discovery in Spiny Rats Brings Hope for Humanity. Bit of a dramatic title there. I'm not sure we
Yeah.
have lost hope in humanity at this point, but really kind of cool thing. So that's what I got for this week. The disappearing Y chromosome.
Cool.
Thanks, Kirk. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, Rachel's going to wrap stuff up for us.
Oh, yeah. I know that many of our listeners and both of you are not a huge fan of the subject I've got for you all this week. But I'd like to say,
Okay.
Kirk, this is your fault. You covered a related topic, and I got curious, and then a friend of mine sent me an article, and it just kind of snowballed from there. Okay?
Awesome.
We've talked
we
a
go.
few times on the podcast about various snakes and venom and some wild species that are out there,
Yep.
right?
Oh, yeah.
But there's something
Absolutely.
they all have in common that we have neglected to talk about.
Ooh, okay.
Any
all right.
ideas what that thing could be?
What snakes have in common?
Mm-hmm.
Did you say, is it specifically venomous snakes or not?
I just said snakes.
Mm.
I mean, they don't have
Well,
limbs. They
don't
have that in
legs.
common.
Yeah, they don't
Yeah.
have legs.
They're
You're
all
right.
reptiles.
You're right. right.
We haven't talked a whole lot of, I mean, I think we talked about their Jacobson's organ and how they smell,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right?
It's a really basic question. Y'all ready?
Yes.
How do they move?
How do snakes move?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They slither, but like, how do they slither? How do they move around? Well, they
I think
famously
we talked about it a little bit on one of the episodes, but yeah.
yeah, a little bit, but
Well,
they famously
I talked about those snakes that climb telephone poles.
exactly
wild.
that was wild. You also talked about a flying snake way
Yes.
back, which I
Yes,
will
I
talk
did.
about in a hot second.
Gosh.
So snakes famously do not have limbs. They don't have arms. They don't have
Yeah.
legs, nothing. So how do they move around? How do they get from place to place? Well, it's wild.
They slither.
They slither, right? We as naturalists and hopefully as science-driven listeners out there, we know that snakes have anywhere from, maybe you don't know this specific number, but they have anywhere from 175 to more than 400 vertebrae in their skeleton.
Ooh, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot, which allows them to be as flexible as they are and allow them to be able to configure themselves in various ways. With the amount of vertebrae that they have, anywhere from 175 to over 400, they have almost an equivalent amount of pairs of ribs along their spine. The only places they wouldn't have it is along their tail and like closer to their head. Okay?
Sure.
Mhm.
And there's a similar amount of muscles that are helping and attaching to those rib bones that help allow them to constrict and be able to move around. Actually, there are more muscles. They have about 1,500 muscles in their body just to help them move, which is wild. Now,
Right.
a key difference between like humans and mammals and snakes is that their ribs are connected to the vertebrae via a ball and socket joint, which is
Oh.
similar to our shoulders and our hips. So they're
Interesting.
obviously still limited by like their orientation as well as like the amount of skin and muscle that are surrounded and what they're able to configure. So they won't be able to like poke through the skin or anything like that. But that does mean that as the snake is beginning to slither, the ribs, which have a nodule at the very end of the rib away from the spine, are able to move forward with the muscles and move back as they crawl around, kind of like how we walk, which is wild. So as I'm thinking about it, as I was thinking about it, it was like a millipede, like how their legs move, but inside the skin and muscle of a snake is just crawling around as they're undulating and able to move their like skin and muscle along.
Yeah.
So they're kind of using their ribs as their own version of legs, just inside.
That is wild.
Uh-huh. Now, so since ribs are by definition inside of the snake, not only are they moving back and forth to help with locomotion, but they are doing some other functions as well. Anywhere from helping move food down the digestive tract, like moving and expanding and helping shift their live prey down into their stomach, so then they're able to breathe through their one lung. But they're also able to widen and narrow themselves to be able to fit through various spaces. Or as the case that brought me here in the first place, they're able to spread their ribs out wide with muscle and skin to create a cobra hood.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So that way,
I read about that, like when I was talking about cobras, and I was like, oh, it's just, it's going too far. Like, I can't go into it. So I'm so glad you brought it up. I had no they're actually spreading their ribs to make that. I was like,
I did not know that either.
They are spreading their ribs out
really
to
wild.
do that. It was absolutely wild. And then they're also able to flatten themselves to fly, as Victoria covered way, way back in episode 28. That is one of the ways that they're able to fly, is they're able to flatten their ribs out a little bit to increase that surface area, which you talked about.
Right.
So I couldn't get this image out of my head. It's a little bit of a short and sweet topic from me this week, but I'm glad that now the millipede inside of a snake now lives inside of everybody else's head, just articulating and moving with the thousands of muscles. I just couldn't get it out of my head and couldn't not think about it. So that was my topic this week. My sources were Wikipedia, Encyclopedia Britannica had a really great thing about snake locomotion and the different ways that they're able to move. Discover Wildlife had a really great article about snake skeletons. But there was also a truly amazing article done in May 2020, Reaction Forces and Rib Function During Locomotion in Snakes, by John Capano, and it was in the Journal of Integrative and Comparative Biology, and it is a free open access article. So you're able to read that whole thing if you want, which is beautiful. Love it. Yeah, but that's what I have for y'all this week, and I'm rounding out the show. So, Victoria, it was great as always to have you. So
always
exciting.
Good to be
Kirk,
here.
great to see you again. It's so exciting.
Good to be here. Yep.
Yeah.
We'll see
So
you
with
next
that,
time.
see y'all next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all of our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach out to us on social media by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can also check out our website, which is strangebynaturepodcast.com. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.